I want to frame this discussion around an important question. I'm going to read it here. So, if you could give yourself advice 6 months ago, before the pandemic, knowing what you know now, what would you do different? Think about that. Think about that. Let it mull around, and as Raj provides some solutions for us, some ideas for us to address just this, we'll talk a little bit about that bigger question in the end. So with that, I'm going to mute myself and let Raj and Emily do their magic.
Thank you. Thank you for that, Mark. So yeah, you know, we've talked a lot about the fatigue that's happening with the pandemic and all of the different dynamics that are happening. And that icebreaker that I got in a networking group a few weeks ago really stopped me in my tracks. So I paraphrased what Mark said very correctly just in the chat. If you could give yourself advice on March 12th, so it's Thursday, March 12th, I remember because it was Friday the 13th where everything hit the fan. We all remember that. And so if you could go back and say, hey, Mr. Business Owner or Mr. Advisor or Mr. Whatever you do, what would you do differently knowing what you know now, right? So it wasn't a couple weeks. It wasn't just stay home for a couple weeks and everything's gonna be fine. It sort of lingered, it got political and all the stuff happened that we know happened. But if we can take a pause and really think about how our professional lives have changed, what's the advice you would give yourself? So that's like how I'd like to frame the discussion. And you may be asking, what is a marketing guy sort of doing, giving advice more broadly? Well, we've taken a customer view of this. So we interviewed a bunch of our customers, we interviewed a bunch of our network, and we started to build some themes of what are top companies doing, what are the trends that we're seeing, or what are the pitfalls that we're seeing. And so what we'll start with is, and first of all, just my style and Emily's style, please interrupt. So Mark told me it's not a very shy group. I'm very happy to be joining Beacon. Push back, ask questions if this applies to your business. I took notes on everybody here. So whether you're advising small and medium-sized businesses, whether you're on the people side of this, there's certainly a major impact on employees and teams. There's a few people that make tangible products, so supply chain is extremely important when we're dealing with the global nature of this pandemic. So I think, you know, my real goal is within this discussion is to have everybody leave with a little bit of a different thought or a different angle on how we approach how we're pivoting our businesses or whatever we might be doing on a day-to-day basis. Okay.
Hey, Raj, are we going to get copies of these slides?
Sure. Yeah, no problem. We can get you a PDF of these. No sweat. And there's a bunch of research and articles that we have that's linked in this. And as me and Emily go through the materials, you'll see some of that. You guys can click and see those articles and read them in their entirety. There's quite a bit back there. So if you're really interested in the meat of it, there's a ton here. So yeah, absolutely available. Yeah, no problem. So we try to take a much broader view. Yeah, we do run a marketing company. Just background on me in case anybody's interested. So I'm mostly a big company guy. I've got a couple of decades working at Fortune 500 type companies. I was a sales guy. I was a marketing guy, which means I did product management. I did strategic marketing. Then I was a strategy consultant for a number of years, working with Fortune 100 companies. And then basically about 3.5 years ago, I took a pretty hard pivot with my own life and career. And that was primarily to work with smaller businesses and to provide marketing as an outsourced service. So, you know, you guys have probably worked with or heard of marketing agencies. That's kind of the bucket we generally get put in, but we like to call ourselves an outsourced marketing department. So that's a little bit about me and the firm. And my co-panelist, Emily, you want to say a very quick hello?
Sure. Hi, everyone. I'm Emily. I'm a content strategist, a writer, and project manager at And Marketing. I joined a year ago in April. I come from, so my first job was in PR and communications and marketing for pharmaceutical and biotech companies. I worked for a big agency in Philly. Was looking for a change, really liked the idea of working with small, medium-sized businesses and sort of similar to Raj's route, you know, taking that big company mindset and finding a way to apply it to smaller businesses who also obviously need marketing. So yeah, I joined, work on a variety of different clients, and I focus on just the overall strategy aspect of things and writing.
So Emily, thanks for the intro, Emily. So Emily, she led a lot of the research around this. So she's going to go through some of the findings and things like that. Again, you're welcome to ask any questions you have as we go through the materials. So Emily, can we go back to the that survey? Yeah. So we've done a couple surveys relatively recently, and I'll just share some of the results. So the first question we asked a bunch of small business owners is, what's your biggest challenge post-pandemic? And we're calling it post-pandemic. We're calling it the new normal. We really mean the same darn thing. We're not post-pandemic. This term, the new normal, is as irritating to us as it is to all of you. So we're trying to find the right thing to call it. But it's really, what is your biggest challenge right now that you're experiencing? And so you can see the results there. And it looks like a pretty good fight between changing customer experience and resetting strategy. So we'll go deeper into those a little bit, but changing customer experience, what that means to me is that the way that your business is interacting with its customers, obviously the primary source of revenue, their experience is changing in the way that they buy, in the way that they experience your products and services, and the way that they talk about your products and services. So that was a big one. The resetting of strategy, I am continually shocked at how few business owners are actually doing a fundamental reset of their strategies. And so we have some thoughts around that, but that turned out to be the top answer, but just barely. And then it's very important to know, I mean, the most important cost that all of us have in our business is our people. And without those people, even if that's just a one-person business, we'd be nothing. So employee engagement and mental health have taken a major disruption, as we all know, because we're all humans and we're living through this this dynamic. I recently heard a term, and I shared this with Mark earlier, on the topic of sort of mental health and the taxing nature of the pandemic. It's called a sysdemic. So that term is when multiple major mental impacts are happening at the same time. So we have a client who's a psychologist who's actually written on this topic. And so, we've got, let's start at the top. We've got a global pandemic that's affecting health. That's two things, right? It's a global pandemic because it shut everything down, and it's affecting our health because it's health related. We've got major political upheaval. I don't know if you guys have, if you're awake or if you've seen any of the political advertising lately, but obviously that's a major thing for the next month at least. You've got major social unrest. If anybody lives in Philly or any other major city, that dominated the last 3 or 4 months. And oh, by the way, those are just the big ones. We've also got, environmental wildfires in the western part of our country. We've got, 5 or 6 other issues we can go through. So all of the impacts of those types of things on employees and people and their engagement at work is a huge impact. For those people that had in-person workforces that on a dime's notice had to go switch those people to be remote workers, that has an impact. So there's a lot there under the employee engagement. I'm elated to have Mark on from Predictive Index, because I can't even imagine what in your head and the research that you've got on how it is impacting teams and leadership and things like that. And then last but not least is supply chains, right? So I think we've got at least one person that deals, Joe, in the tangible product world, but we do a lot of work in manufacturing and distribution, and their supply chains have been disrupted in a major way. I have 2 safety products clients, and to say that their business has been completely disrupted and revolutionized is the understatement of the century. They're just totally different companies than they were 6 months ago. So that was the first piece of research. The second one was specifically related to marketing. And so we asked a similar group, how has your marketing approach changed? And so the number one dominant answer is pivoting towards digital marketing. And of course, it's easy for me to say I run a digital marketing company, right? So that's the change. But traditional spending on things like trade shows, maybe print publications and other things like that have moved significantly over to digital. Because the dominant thing that I'm hearing back, there's kind of 2 themes that I'm hearing as a marketing business owner. Number one, in B2B, people are used to face-to-face communication, networking, trade shows, and things like that. They want to find a way to pivot that. So the engagement metrics on LinkedIn specifically have absolutely exploded over the last 6 months. So putting out really good content, driving really good engagement. I think I saw there's a webinar coming up on the use of Sales Navigator that has absolutely exploded. I'm very happy to say LinkedIn, who was acquired by Microsoft about 3 years ago has really stuck to their roots about being a good social platform. Now the junk is increasing for others that are on there, and that's getting a little bit difficult. But through the pandemic, they've really done a good job of adjusting. Let's hope that Microsoft doesn't screw it up.
Hey, Raj, I had a quick question for you.
Go ahead. Yeah, sure.
Looking at pre-COVID, approximately what percentage spend were you seeing, small to mid-sized B2B companies investing into, marketing in general?
Yes, it's a great question. And the number varies really dramatically by industry. What I would say is if you are facing the public, so I know it's B2B, but if you do anything that's public facing, that tends to be a lot more because you need to spend a lot more. So those numbers tend to be in the 20% range. Okay. And then for B2B types of companies, sort of 15 to 20% is maybe the higher end. And there's some people that are in the 5 to 15. What is unclear in the data, and I want to be really transparent about this because I've looked at a lot of it, is do you count the people in that spend? So if you have a marketing department, do their salaries get counted or not? Or is it really what we call activation spending, which is, actively advertising and things like that.
Right.
So if you look at the whole bucket, that number can be as low as like 5%, or it can be as high as like 25%. What I would say, just understanding the makeup of the people here, is that you should be thinking around 10%, right? So like, am I joining the right groups? Am I advertising the right way? Have I invested in networking groups? Like that's a generally good number, but it's just so hard to say because people's businesses are so different. It's a great question, Mark.
Thank you.
So in the same survey, 11% of people are increasing their overall marketing spend. A few people, which is interesting to me because, as a business owner who runs a marketing company, I would expect people clench up when it comes to marketing spend during a disruption, but that number was a little lower than we expected. So 34% were unchanged and only about 5% reduced it. And then we got a bunch of other answers in that survey. Okay. So just to frame the discussion, here's kind of what we're seeing overall. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it's good.
Awesome. Yeah. Let's keep plugging, Emily. So I think, Emily, you're going to go through the next couple of slides here. Again, interruptions are welcome.
I'll go through the trends here and then I'll let you take the next slide, Raj. So here we've outlined, and like Raj said, we have a full series of articles that really goes into each of the emerging trends that we're seeing as a result of COVID. So we'll just give you sort of a preview of it here. But the first one we have, customers will have a stronger and long-lasting focus on health and cleanliness. Obviously we see trends come and go when it comes to consumers and buying habits, but this idea and this concept, and I'm sure there's a lot of fatigue surrounding it, but it's not going anywhere anytime soon. I mean, people will for a very long time be very concerned about, health and making sure that, it's important that you as a business are constantly communicating how, the precautions that you're taking, and it might sound repetitive or like you're a broken record, but it is very important. The next trend, we're seeing people spend more time at home and be focused on improving this environment for personal and professional life. Obviously, you guys know this, we're all living it right now. But even as things, quote unquote, start to open up, we're still going to have a lot of people that are staying, at the home base and wanting to improve that environment, with both their families and their personal life and when it comes to work. Digital will.
Emily, let me just jump in there. So just think about your own personal behavior and a couple of data points to support that. So the spending on home offices has absolutely exploded. I don't know if anybody else spent money on their own home offices, whether it's buying equipment, buying furniture, or things like that, an absolute explosion. The other thing that has exploded is home improvement. So you sit at home for 3 or 4 months, you're looking around your house, you're saying, oh my God, that needs to get fixed, that needs to get fixed, and that needs to get fixed. So we have a couple of contractor clients, so like home contractors, their businesses very secretly have exploded because one of the leading metrics we look at is search traffic. So if you look at keyword terms and what their Google search rankings are, so things like home remodeling, office remodeling, and all of these types of terms are exploding. Because you can imagine you're sitting home, you're thinking to yourself, oh my gosh, I need to get another bathroom, or my basement needs to be expanded because I need to work from home and I need to plan on this for a long time.
My carpet's dirty, I need to get a new one.
100%, I mean 100%. Like we, just as a personal anecdote, we're preparing for a long-term into the fall, and right outside of my office is my back patio. We bought new furniture, we bought a heater because I want to spend some more time outside. I love these four walls, but getting outside a little bit personally, and the data really does play that. So it's a great point, Steve. Sorry, Emily, back to you, or any questions, you're welcome here.
Okay, great. So the next one we have is digital will dominate both B2B and B2C, and all stakeholders will expect tech capabilities. So if you, at this point, have evaded having a strong digital presence, that we're learning will no longer be sustainable. The cutting edge, cool technologies of today are going to be just the norm tomorrow. So that's, having a strong website, having a great user experience, just making sure that all touch points in your customer journey, there's a digital realm to that. Because like we said in the trend previously, with the focus on the home life, personal and professional, I mean, everyone's going to be encountering your business in a digital way of some sort. So you want to be able to make that good first impression.
Yeah, I'll just add one, Emily, I'll just add one to that. So one of the biggest trends we're seeing in our business, so I mentioned the earlier one with the explosion of LinkedIn and people wanting content. The second one we're noticing is for consumer facing companies to have a really good e-commerce site. We call it the Amazon effect. So the reason we go to this thing 50 times every time we want to go shopping is because we expect something to magically show up at our house in 2 days for free. We all expect it, right? We expect it to be seamless. We expect it to be in stock. And so for smaller companies, when they're trying to do that, what they woke up and realized in, the end of March after the initial craziness wore off is that, oh my gosh, there's so many more people who are coming to my e-commerce site that want to buy things. What is my purchasing experience like? How is that e-commerce experience? Because if you're a small business, you don't have obviously the resources that an Amazon does, but the customer expectation or the consumer expectation is the same, that it's going to be 2 buttons, it's going to be easy, and we go and it arrives. Right. So that level of expectation is just an example of what we've seen in our business of just an explosion of where consumer and customer expectations have gone.
Okay.
Great.
The next one we have, smaller competitors will go out of business and new partnerships will emerge. You've likely seen this, potentially with small businesses in your area that haven't been able to make it through the pandemic. And we're seeing some unconventional partnerships too, even competitors who are realizing that they have complementary offerings are partnering up with one another, just looking for creative solutions, to stay in business.
Yeah, just let me just jump in there again, Emily, sorry. So especially around small companies, and this is really pointed towards those who are in the financial industry. So I think that's at least 3 or 4 of you guys or guys and gals. It's really important to know that cash is king. And so initially there was a humongous cash crunch for small businesses. We got the PPP, we got small business loans. So it's like a 4-month period where that was relieved. And now we're back. So I'm seeing a lot of leading indicators. Again, I'm not in the financial world, but I do have some clients and I obviously read a little bit in that space, is that it looks like going into the 4th quarter, cash is going to be really important again, which may lead to smaller businesses going out of business, having competitors start to partner up and do partnerships and things like that. So the level of the research has shown that during a major market disruption, this is the moment where unconventional partnerships happen. So whether that's forward or backwards integration, whether that's competitors getting together, whether that's unique partnerships, there's a lot of that type of activity that we can anticipate probably in the next 3 months. And it's probably affecting your businesses as well.
Okay. And the last one we have here is around supply chains. Especially from an international perspective, these have certainly been disrupted, or companies that are single sourcing. So I think what we've learned so far is just the need to diversify, where you're sourcing things from. So that's the last trend that we've identified. Anything you want to add there, Raj, or should we?
No, I think we've talked about it. Any questions from the group, please?
Yeah, I was just going to comment about the supply chain issue. I have a number of clients in manufacturing, and one in particular is in medical device, right? And so it's healthcare, and these are pretty critical devices. And they had some component manufacturing from China and some from Europe. And wow, that threw a major curveball in their ability to complete the finished products that these big OEMs like Medtronic, Stryker, and other major global medical companies had. So it's the real deal. And yeah, as a result, change requires doing things differently, right? And so, yeah, now they've dual sourced a lot of those things to address that if it were to happen again. And, the other just quick comment around what David had mentioned about continuity plans, at least in the healthcare industry, particularly in medical device, every one of the bigger players is saying, I now need a continuity plan, right? They want to know you have a backup plan for our products. So yeah, a lot of changes for sure.
Yeah, Mark, let me add to that. So it is definitely healthcare. If your business or your client's business touches healthcare, you already know this. I don't need to tell you that, right? It's a great example. But the domino effects of impacts to the healthcare supply chain impact other ones. I'll just give you a random one. I happen to have a client that is in let's call it a base manufacturing type of business. And they actually went on specific allocations because one of their components had to be used in masks. And so the mandate came down. I think it was from their leadership, and it was let's say it was regulatorily influenced, but not mandated, that a certain percentage of their products, and they did not make masks. Let's be very clear. They made a very different product. A certain percentage of their materials had to go to mass production when time was up for that. So they literally couldn't ship their own product until they proved that a certain percentage of their materials were made for masks. It's just the way the world sort of had to pivot on that. And if you don't think that makes a difference to those businesses that previously didn't even touch healthcare, then that's a good learning.
So Raj, I'll let you take this one, but basically just as a setup here, so we took the trends and the discontinuities that we saw and that we just reviewed, and we basically created, a list of key priorities and action items organized between strategy, managing your customers, your employee relationships, and your supply chains.
Yeah, thanks, Emily. So we have a choice here, folks, and the time is yours. I'm happy to go as deep as you want to. So in the backup, we actually have a page on each of these topics. So what are the things you should be thinking about strategy? What should you be thinking about customers, employees, and supply chains? So we're happy to go through that in some level of detail. Maybe I'll ask the group, and maybe I'll hit the high points, and we can decide if we want to go back there. Mark, you as a host, I'll invite you to maybe chime in on what we prefer. Do we want to do the high level hits? Do we want to go a little bit deeper? It's entirely up to the group. So go deeper, you say?
I'll speak for myself, not the group, but the idea of strategy, what are the basic steps
Sure.
that, any business, certainly all of ours, should be putting down on paper and thinking through and assessing and measuring, to decide what new strategy we should approach, or is it a tweak of the existing one?
Yeah, that's great. That's great. So Emily, I'll invite you to actually go to page 12, and I'll do the slightly deeper version of these. And again, stop me if you want to interrupt and ask a question here. These are all available, and maybe in the participant channel, if you guys have questions or you want me to go a little faster, and my intent is not to bore you here, but hopefully be informative. So if you want to use the voting or something like that, we'll get a gauge. So I'll start with strategy. So again, I'm a strategy guy that happens to do marketing. So the impact of resetting your business strategy at a major market disruption cannot be understated, right? So the basic building blocks of what that could look like, and it could be as simple as you turn the door, you turn the phone off and you shut your door for half a day, and you really just wallow in these types of questions on how your business has been impacted. Or it could be as large as you get your leadership team together, you get some input from customers, you get some research together, and you make that a more sort of thoughtful exercise. Again, that's entirely up to you. Here are some building blocks that we use when we do these sort of strategic exercises with our clients. So the sort of inputs that we think about, those are the orange bars on the left-hand side of the page. And what we call it is, the first thing we do is we call it, what is the state of the business? So what is going on with our business? What's our financial health? What does our customer roadmap look like? What feedback are we hearing, and those types of things? What's the state of the business? What's my cash position? What is my customer retention? So for me, for example, one of our businesses was deeply in healthcare, and they basically had to shut their doors overnight because their business was predicated on going to office buildings and delivering healthcare as a point of service. So like when there's no people in office buildings, they can't do business. So that was a major disruption to my business, right? Obviously. So that's where we had to come back from. So that's the state of your individual business. The second one is, what are the key macro trends impacting your business? So we know about a lot of these frameworks like STEEP or PESTLE or things like that. I encourage you to dust one of those off and really look at it through the lens of what the pandemic and the other things that are going on have to it. So what are the key macro trends? What's happening, in the environment? What's happening politically? What's happening, obviously, with healthcare? What are those things that are happening from a macro perspective that have an impact on my business? The third one is my favorite exercise. It's the easiest one in the world to do, and I'm shocked at how few people do it. It is a basic SWOT exercise, right? So internally, what are my strengths and weaknesses given everything I just did in the first two exercises? What are my external opportunities and what are my external threats? I would be shocked that if a business owner has not done this process, that they don't get some insight in doing those first three steps. Okay. And what that might cause you to do is the fourth thing, that's the redefine your core competencies. So core competencies, said a little bit differently, are the attributes or the benefits of your business that nobody else can do, right? And they're not always the things you think that they are, but what are your core competencies? Are you really good at manufacturing? You have a particular process? Do you have particular IP? What are the things based on those first three exercises that rise to the top that allow you to be, the best in the world or the best in your market at? Okay, so getting those four inputs forces you to think about your business differently, right? And there's enough coaches on this call that have probably done these processes themselves that maybe, invite a new framework or something like that. I think that's great thinking. But you basically bring all of that together to really prioritize your opportunities. One of the most perilous things we found when we go through this prioritization exercise is that business owners, especially small business owners, try to take on too much. Right? If you're going to prioritize 15 opportunities and you only have 3 people, boy, you're set up for failure. Like pick 3, pick maybe 4, maybe 2, right? Maybe it's a couple things that you're going to go do differently as a result of your businesses. Then you go through the resourcing process. Now, one of the things we like to do because we're consultants is we like to summarize that in a nice, pretty strategy map. But it's really a down select of where you want to adjust your strategy. What are the most important strategic elements that you want to adjust? Okay, so just this simple process. Again, it's maybe simplified a little bit for people who are a little more advanced, but we try to make these bite-sized enough that a small business can sort of pick this up and kind of operate with it.
That's helpful. Thanks.
Yeah. So, any questions around the strategy stuff? I'm always happy to have these kinds of discussions.
The one thing I find, at least with my clients and myself for that matter, is the strength and weaknesses bias. Because you're looking from the inside out. We tend to overblow our strengths, right? There's not a lot of, checking, qualification of, yeah, we're great at this, it's a strength. Well, are we? And, how are we positioned relative to the market based on those strengths, and usually the weaknesses, they don't catch them all because again, they just live and breathe that business, and it's hard to kind of see from the outside in, when you're so focused on the in.
You're absolutely right. And you know who tells you your strengths and weaknesses? Not you. Your customers tell you your strengths and weaknesses.
I was just going to say that, Raj.
Right? I mean, that's just the truth of life, right? So just a point to add on that, Mark, because I think it's a brilliant point, is on the strength side, if you can take your biggest competitor, put those same strengths, question whether they're really strengths. Or is it just the cost of entry into your category? Is it really a strength or is it just something you do? And then on the weaknesses side, I encourage you to ask your customers or reframe and do a SWOT for a competitor and really think about what your weaknesses are. What are your exposures? What are those types of things? Yeah, it's a great point that if we use the term eat your own dog food. If all you do is stare at yourself all day long, then all you're going to do is get your same outputs over and over. You really, this forces you to challenge your biases. Okay. Questions or commentary from anybody else? So I think, Emily, if you can go to the next slide, page 13. Again, these are all available later. I'm certainly not going to go through all of these. But what we found is these 4 or 5 major trends, and then maybe some of the things we're seeing either top companies doing or companies should be thinking about doing. So the first one is, customer anxiety. I think Emily addressed that a little bit earlier. But this is an opportunity to build trust and deepen relationships. One of the first things most people did appropriately is when things were really chaotic, is they just reached out to their best customers. How are things going? How is your health? How can I help? Right? So if you didn't do that, that's okay. You've always got that opportunity to reach out to some of these customers and just connect on a human level. How are you? We're headed to the fourth quarter. How's your business? How's life? What's going on? Kids are back in school. Kids are back in college. How's that process going? Right? So building trust and deepening relationships is always a great answer, as long as you're doing it in a genuine way. The second one is, behaviors are changing fundamentally, right? So one of the things that we talk about is market research used to be this sort of like one-time activity that the marketing department sort of did off in the distance. And then they got output 6 months later, and it was kind of like this thing. Really, what business owners should be thinking about is, how are things happening on the ground on an everyday basis? So there's this thing called a pulse survey, where you're constantly pulsing a small segment of your customers just to connect. And another way to do that for more established companies is to actually assign multiple customers to each member of your leadership team. So they're keeping in touch on a regular basis, just from a relationship perspective. How's it going and how's business? One of the uncomfortable questions I've forced into my business is we start every client call with, how are you and how's business? Because instead of me talking about my agenda, I want to hear about what's going on with you. How's it going? What's up? What's down? What's your worry today? What's this thing? And that allows you to, on an ongoing basis, really understand what their lives are going like. The third one's about technology, right? So fast tracking technology. So I already mentioned e-commerce. I already mentioned content. On a non-marketing side, you see a lot of these previously paper-based sorts of systems like invoicing and other things like that are going online really quickly. I'm not the expert in those areas at all, but the digitization is really exploding. So what are the types of technologies that make your customers' interactions with you easier, is a kind of the third big topic about customer experience. The fourth one is Mark's bailiwick, so he could probably write a book on this, but fundamentally the sales function is changing dramatically, because previously salespeople may have been out in front of customers interacting with them directly. They might have been on the phone, but now we're all home, right? Customers are human beings too. So the way that they interact with salespeople, the way that they make purchasing decisions, the way that they make group decisions that they delay or decisions that they fast track, fundamentally change. So the concept of social selling, right, which is how you build relationships and add value on platforms like LinkedIn in order to drive sales conversations, is really the big trend that we're seeing. So one of the core tenets we have is that in a B2B interaction, you must give value before you try to extract value. Because in today's sophisticated manner, we're not lacking for salespeople, right? We know that there's plenty of people out there trying to sell us stuff, but we want to only invite those people in that offer us value first.
Right. Now that's a huge change, and it kind of goes, for at least for my business, it went back to number one first, and so many of the clients were kind of flat-footed initially because they no longer could approach sales the way they did before, right? And a colleague of mine calls it camping. Some were just camping, kind of waiting for something to change. Like waiting. They're in their foxholes, just listening to the bombs drop, and they weren't doing anything. So spent a lot of time re-engineering the sales process, right? And obviously digitizing it, automating it, bringing outside support for tools like Reply.0 and other marketing automation tools, and prospecting cadences. That video is a big thing too. Just a quick anecdotal example: a client who focuses on big OEMs, and it's a small to mid-sized company. They're, and again, a contract manufacturer and very commodity-based business. So how did we approach that? Because these clients are all over the country and we can't see them. And it's a very technical engineering focused product service. So we developed 4 simple videos. We call them course 1 to course 4. And as a value add, we use these videos as training tools for the engineers at those client accounts and prospect accounts for that matter. But right now it's mostly existing accounts. So we're not selling them anything, even though we are. They're clearly seeing our expertise, and They're getting some training on how to design their products in a way that's is better for manufacturing, because that was the problem. They weren't. So it's just an example of trying to pivot in a market that's changed and get our faces and our name and our value right in front of, the ideal audience, and offering them value, right? Giving them something they could use. And as a result, they're viewing us more as consultants rather than vendors. And of course, they're also asking about, hey, what about this? What about that? So that was so far it's been a good example of the change that's really been forced on us. But if we didn't do something, we'd still be camping in our foxholes.
Absolutely right. Absolutely right.
Well, yeah, I'll offer a point that supports that. My company launched a new product this week, and one of the significant things is one of the design criteria for the new product. And it was a metric they called time to value, speed to value. How fast can we show value to the client? And I thought that was pretty telling about how things have changed.
I love it. Yeah, absolutely. I love it, Mark. Sorry, go ahead, Mark.
It's good.
Yeah, that's phenomenal. It's phenomenal. And then the last one on customers. So again, in the period of social unrest that was so prominent over the last 6 months, one of the things we noticed is that the customer expectation for the people with whom they do business has changed. 20 or 30 years ago, it was almost like you had to be apolitical. And now it's like this dynamic has changed. So certainly big companies have gone much more political, and there's a lot of banter about that. But it's almost like you have to select the causes and the things that you want to go public about. So be careful about it. The only answer is you got to be careful, because for every one thing you say that represents what you think you are, there is a downside effect of it. So the advice is carefully select, carefully communicate, because so many of these things have been politicized that you just need to be careful as you're doing it. The trend we're seeing, the irrefutable trend, is that companies are more and more being expected to do the things. And if they're sitting on the sidelines, it's almost like their investors or their customers are going to ask what their positions are. So as business leaders or people who advise business leaders, it's just a reality of running a business.
Raj, forgive me if you've said this already, but I think you said that your data here, you gathered it based on interviews you did with clients. Is that right?
So it's an amalgamation of multiple. So we did a lot of secondary research. So
Okay.
Reading other articles, other points of views, and then we did a lot of primary research. So these are with my clients, with other people in the sort of value chain that I work in and live in. And then there was a bunch of surveys we did that went to various groups. Correct.
Okay.
So I would say it was, let me say we did it optimizing for speed and less for science. So are these statistically significant? Probably not. Could we have done larger sample size? Probably so. But these are just sort of overall thoughts we have. Does that spark a question, Mark, or does that answer what you were looking for?
No, that answered it. Thanks.
I'll touch on the next page, Emily, if you could. I'll touch on employees. I think we talked about that one a little bit more, and then I'll touch on supply chain as well. But in the employee world, I think we talked about these, but what's happening is, you've got people that are a little less connected. You've got employees that are even more distributed. So think about all the companies that have either extended the period where they're not expecting people to go back into work, or entirely gone remote. So large companies are announcing it seems like on a weekly basis that, hey, we're not going back until 2022 now. All of a sudden, this has gone from just a few weeks to now, wow, 2 years. Other companies have said it's a permanent change. Growing contingent workforce. So the freelance economy or the gig economy has not just heated up even more, but it was already a big trend, and now it's sort of exploded that so many people, including people on this call, are part of that freelance economy. Emotionally exhausted. So if we're bombarded by so many messages all the time, and you happen to be working from home, and you happen to have social media open, and you happen to have the news on in the background, and all these other things are happening, it really does cause a level of emotional exhaustion. And so, that's another one. The socially conscious one, which I addressed a moment ago, is certainly a part of that. So as you're thinking about your interactions with your employees, know that that's what they're coming into it with, right? So it's like, how do you deliver a great employee experience? Because if your industry is still hiring, which so many industries are, you're going to actually start to lose people based on some of these types of things. So employee attrition is a very real challenge that I'm hearing from a lot of people. And then on the supply chain side, again, happy to take questions on the employee piece, but on the supply chain side, you know, I think we've talked about this one quite a bit, but it's like, you know, vendors may not be opening up. Small companies may be forced to consolidate. There's obviously a humongous dynamic with China. It seems like China's starting to open up manufacturing, or has been opening up manufacturing. But a lot of companies are reconsidering single source solutions. They're onshoring a little bit more. You know, this whole concept of essential supplies and essential workers is a major factor. So there's a lot more detail here. Maybe it's not suitable for this entire audience, but you know, you can certainly read about that a little bit later if you'd like to. Okay, so any questions? Again, I'm happy to go on a little bit deeper into that, but happy to answer any other questions.
Quick one, Raj, on the employee slide, you had an article referenced at the bottom. Is that your publication or?
Yeah, that's an article that we wrote, and I think
Okay.
Emily was the lead writer with one of our advisors who had done some of that research. You're welcome to take a look at it. And again, Mark, uniquely for you, I'd love any perspective that you have. Is that headed in the right direction? Do we miss the mark? You know, that's some really good thinking that somebody like yourself could provide.
Yeah, I'd like to read that. I'll reach out to you on that.
Great. Yeah, and Zoe or Mark can make the slides available or downloadable, whatever there. We'll provide those to you guys. So that's the bulk of it. Emily, maybe could you go back up to slide 7? I think that was the next slide.
Yep.
So, you know, as we've been talking about this, this story is not over. Certainly not over. There's still a lot of the story is still being told. As I think I said a moment ago, like, we're not going to really know the impact of this until much later. Like, we're still discovering the impact of the financial crisis, and that was 12 or 13 years ago. So it's like, these things are going to take time. So, you know, these are intended to be a guide, a directional guide for you to use at your own leisure or your own benefit for yourself and your clients. You know, one of the interesting things on the right-hand side of the page is this podcaster Lewis Howes came up with is, you know, the marketing data point. I don't know if I've ever actually found a data point, but innovation during market disruptions tend to keep that share afterwards. So it's like, when you think other people aren't spending or doing things differently, now is the actual time to go do that. And, you know, just as a point of inspiration, those are all companies on the right-hand side of the page that didn't exist before the financial crisis. Like, think about the impact of all of them in our lives, right? I don't think Zoom existed, so we wouldn't be on this call. We'd have to be using a different format as well. So just, you know, maybe as a point of inspiration or a point of thought, that if you're thinking about your business differently, that's one way to look at it. And I think that's about it. Emily, if you could flip to, the next page, just has my contact information. If you guys want to reach out, have any questions, happy to do a side chat. Would love to learn about your businesses or network otherwise, and understand how we can collaborate. And then Emily, could you flip to slide 10? We're doing a webinar. Again, the invite's in here, but we're doing a webinar with another one of my advisors in a couple of weeks. And that's really about gearing up for the fourth quarter and getting ready for your 2021. It's much more marketing focused. So we'll be talking a lot more about that. But if you're interested in that, the registration's at the bottom of the page as well. With that, I'll offer it back to you, Mark. And I don't know if you want to go around the horn and get people's responses to that initial question. If you want to go in a different direction, it's entirely up to you.
No, I thought that, you know, with framing that question and now looking at the reality and some of these great ideas, it's a great time, I think, to share what we have done and what we would like to do. And I'll, you know, start with myself. I guess fortunately in my world, I've effectively been working virtually for most of my career. So the idea of webinars and Zoom, that's already been in place, which was a huge advantage, frankly, a huge advantage, because I'm used to it, right? And it is a good tool. Unfortunately now, because everyone has to use it, it's almost, there's certainly no, I guess, uniqueness to it anymore. Some people like it and some people don't. But the other simple fact is that, yes, I can't go and see, you know, the clients that I would go and see oftentimes once a week, you know, and that FaceTime and, you know, just that hanging out, having a cup of coffee and shooting the breeze and just talking about what's happening, you know, it's just much harder to do. So one, as far as the client base and then how it rolled to me was, yes, okay, how do I change my approach to the market, number one? And so I did turn up the volume, to your point, using digital tools. And just as an example, I now use Vidyard, and that, and if you're not familiar with Vidyard, there's other platforms. I'm sure Raj can recommend some others as well. But it's basically, it's on my laptop. I press a button and I speak, and it records my email and more technology stuff. Because it creates a GIF file versus a flat video file. When I send it as an email, it doesn't get caught up in spam. So that's one of the benefits. And it includes, links to my site or a particular article I may have referenced. And, looking at, we're pretty agnostic to CRMs, but HubSpot does some really nice research and kind of reports out what's happening in terms of activity as a whole. And there's no question the amount of emails, and it's still happening, has just really skyrocketed. I'm sure, Raj, you can attest to that, right? Just the sheer volume we, and therefore our customers and clients, are getting is just increasing. So there's just so much stuff. But the other point was that the number of people actually opening, the percentage of people opening emails has decreased. So, if you think about it, if it's just a flat email, whether it's just communication or it's some promotional thing or some marketing effort, it's going to have less likelihood of actually reaching that audience, right? Just because of the sheer number that you're competing with. And Vidyard is just a way to differentiate. They get an email, it's kind of a static picture of me, moving a little bit. And, our brains are wired to focus on movement, and the open rates tend to be higher. So that's just one example. Also turned up the volume on posts on LinkedIn, and as well as, my site, and to leverage, maybe I shouldn't admit this, but I never had a Facebook account prior to COVID. I had nothing against Facebook, frankly. I just didn't have time for it. I just still scratch my head. How do people find time to do that? But I now have a Facebook account just for my business, and it just feeds all the other core marketing type communication and white papers and things. And by creating an Innovo site on LinkedIn, that's kind of the core platform. And I can actually invite people to join just my company LinkedIn site, which is nice because that's a smaller audience. And the last thing, it's really more strategic, and it's just coincidental, started working on a whole other strategy, which would leverage kind of the digital side of things and create more of a recurring stream of revenue for the business versus kind of the lumpy stream that we get in our businesses typically. And it focuses on sales managers, right? People who actually manage salespeople. And there aren't many places, because I've been around a while, that I could have gone throughout my career that would have information for me to how to improve my skills as a sales leader, whether I'm a manager, director, or VP of sales. And when you add the fact that these are small to mid-sized companies that I'm focusing on in the B2B market, there's even less resources and training. So it's a private community that you have to kind of apply to get in. So there's a little bit of the velvet rope effect, scarcity effect, because we only want the right people on board. And of course, there's content on the site, but we also have private webinars. There's also a course that we're using another digital platform to create and, measure, test, all that good stuff. And then finally, groups of 5 members every month will meet virtually, and I'll lead that discussion of the same group of 5. And we'll talk about a particular topic or run through an issue that they may be dealing with, such as a employee that's not doing well, or compensation plans, or any number, forecasting, planning for 2021, whatever the case may be. And it's a subscription service, and so that's a pivot that I'm doing simultaneously. So that's kind of what I'm doing, and what our strategy is. That site will also, feed leads into the core business, because it's basically somewhat of the same audience, but into the same companies. So that's how we're managing what's going on, and hopefully it'll work out.
It's a great example of a pivot, Mark.
Yeah.
What was that email dictation service? How do you spell that?
So, Stephen, I think he means video. The video
Vidyard?
one.
Oh, video?
Video, what is that?
Yeah, it's Vidyard, VID as in David, Yard, YARD.com. And off the top of my head, I can't think of the other ones. I'm sure Raj could give you other examples. I mean, I'm not promoting Vidyard. I get no, I have no vested interest in it. There's other ones, but that one I liked. It was helpful.
No, it's a real one. And Stephen, to be clear, it's not a transcription service. What it is this is actually an email. It allows you to email a video of yourself embedded in an email, and you can tell when somebody opens it, and it's just considered much more personal.
Got it. Okay, thank you.
And so
Yeah.
Mark actually gave me one of the first ones I ever got, and it was just like, hey, Raj, great talking to you. Here's what we talked about. Here's the next steps. Look forward to hearing back from you. And I've had multiple people do that, and I've done that with success as well. There's also the function within LinkedIn where you can leave somebody a video message, and it's a personalized message. So we're all bombarded with too many LinkedIn messages. That's a known factor. But if it's something to reconnect or humanize your communication, you could do that for free inside LinkedIn.
Is that a new feature, Raj, in LinkedIn?
It's relatively new, yeah. It's
Yeah.
they're promoting the heck out of it, but it's a relatively new feature, and it works really well. Just same kind of concept. Great following up with you. Looking forward to the next discussion. Here's what we're going to talk about. The open rates for those types of things are far, far more than just basically text-based email. And I think just one thing that always comes up is, your own self-conscious person of saying, do I look perfect on camera, and is it perfect, and has this been done? Like, throw that away. Obviously, it has to be good and professional, but the expectation that people have, the bar is a lot lower, and it's just considered much more personal communication to do that type of thing. So just doesn't.
And that's called Video Yard?
Vidyard.
Vidyard.
I'll just put the, let me go to the chat, and I'll just send it to everybody.
Thank you.
The website. Another really interesting digital tool, uses AI. That's part of LinkedIn, and as a salesperson myself, but I also now have sales teams that I support use it. It's called, it's got a crazy name, Crystal Knows. I'll send this link to that as well. Crystal as in, the stone, Crystal Knows, Knows. And it's actually a Google, well, it's a bolt onto LinkedIn. And once you have an individual, and you don't have to be connected with them, you press the button, and it gives you a full disc profile on that individual. And it's basically using all the data that person has on their disc profile, and apparently also other public social media, data. And I got to tell you, man, it's about 95% accurate. It's pretty impressive. And the value to that is, if I'm working with a client and they tend to be more of a C in the disc kind of vernacular, a little more, I'm a D, so I'm kind of the higher strung classic A personality, but a C is much more composed. They don't like to make decisions. They like lots of facts and information. They take time making decisions. And if I know that going into a conversation, I can adjust kind of my approach to them. I can be more patient. I cannot kind of, not that I'd be pushy, but I can't avoid putting in a position to say, hey, let's make a decision here. Are we going to go or not, sort of thing. That's a really powerful tool. It's amazing, right? It's kind of scary, but it's out there, and it's another tool that can help you be more effective when you're going to meet with a new client, or for that matter, even an existing client. And from a sales management perspective, and I prefer, and it's not a endorsement necessarily, but I prefer a predictive index. I wish they had that kind of tool. But when you're managing teams, it's also really helpful to understand and appreciate the different individuals and how you can communicate better with them. So there's just so much out there, and based on what you need. And again, this is Raj's world. What are the best tools based on what you're trying to achieve? And all those things just make us a little better.
One thing I've noticed, and it's not really a tool, but just observations within Beacon, slightly different than a business, but the whole early adopters versus late adopters, I've noticed that has happened within our membership, where there was people who hit the ground running. March 13th, they were already ready to do this pivot, and they pivoted really quickly. And then, others were very reluctant. I even had people emailing me saying, look, I'm not going to renew my membership because I want to wait for this all to blow over. And then as it drew out longer, and those people started to realize, well, it's not going to blow over in a matter of weeks or even months. It's going to be, 6 plus, maybe even 10 plus months. Then people slowly started to come back. So I wonder if that's a trend maybe you've seen in your businesses when you're trying to market to or sell to some of your customers. You might have seen initially the people that you're having conversations with are those early adopters. They pivoted quickly. They became comfortable with Zoom and digital very quickly, versus others that kind of drag their feet a little bit. Maybe they're coming around now. And then you might even see some people even later coming around. I don't know if that, I'm just trying to articulate that, but just the different comfort levels people have with kind of pivoting, moving on, becoming proficient with technology. And you can kind of think about it in waves. Like you already dealt with the first wave of people, but now maybe it's time to start marketing to those second wave of people that are finally now adjusting.
I agree.
Go
ahead, Raj.
No, I was floor's open. I'm not laughing. I'm sorry. I'm reviewing the comments that some people are putting in as their pivots. If anybody wants to go through theirs, I think that'd be awesome. So the answer to the question, if you can give yourself one piece of advice on March 12th, knowing what you know now, what would you do? And I saw a couple of them. They're awesome answers. And I talked to somebody just yesterday who last year spent $400,000 on an upgraded office space and created a whole studio space and this whole thing. And their answer was very obvious. A couple of people commented on that. So anybody's welcome to share their example if they'd like to. I think it's great.
Yeah, I put in there that we did an office expansion also. It was very small. We just basically busted through a wall and took some unused office space to the one side of our current office. Added 4 new people. They each had their own private office in there. And then, that was maybe October of last year. And I myself have only been to our office 3 times since March. There are some people who go in and they kind of stay as far away from each other as possible, but it's crazy. And we had to, obviously sign a new lease to get that office expansion. And now I know that we're kind of thinking, wow, why did we do that?
Yeah, we did the same thing. Actually, September 1 of last year. And great space, new cubicles, looks great. It's empty. I've been coming in the last 6 weeks, but it's just a change from my home office, but it's empty. Very limited staff, very few advisors coming in. One of the things I would have done, a couple things I would have done, I used Zoom and WebEx very little before the pandemic. So there was a learning curve there, and a learning curve for half my team. So I would have geared up earlier, trained earlier on that for everybody to be efficient. And then I would have outfitted my office with better technology. Really didn't have a whole lot there. So live and learn. Right?
Yeah, for sure. Yeah. And I need all the help I can get as far as, the picture you see, right? So yeah, I invested in lighting, a quality camera, and I also use this little microphone. It's $20 from Amazon, but sound quality is important. And I've just been on meetings where their sound quality is terrible, and if I'm trying to communicate with people, I mean, it's bad enough I can't be with them. Now they can't really hear me. It's kind of, I feel it's my responsibility to present the best I can be to my clients and prospects. If I could change anything, I would have gotten into cash on my, I would have gotten into cash earlier, right?
And then waited a few weeks and then bought it all back.
I'm still in cash. I'm waiting. I'm still in cash. I'm just too nervous. I just don't know what's going to happen.
Mark, you mentioned.
Yeah,
Sorry,
go ahead, Mark. No, please.
You mentioned that you geared up your video platform. Clearly, a lot of us have done that. And one of the things I wonder about is 2 years from now, what will video use be like? Because the technologies that we're using are not new. As you know, Mark, you mentioned earlier, you've probably been using Skype and WebEx for years. Zoom is pretty new, but this technology is not new. So given that it wasn't used extensively 2 years from now, what is video use going to be like 2 years from now?
Yeah, my opinion is this is going to be a permanent piece of the whole customer journey, right? Yes, it will be reduced some as we're able to meet face to face, but frankly, from a productivity perspective, it's a lot more efficient. I mean, I actually went to a human-to-human meeting yesterday morning, and I had 45 minutes to get there, had the meeting. It was great. We were all together, used social distancing and mask and all that stuff. And then I had another 45 minutes to drive back, and I kind of scratching my head, could have we've done all of this without getting together? And the truth is yes, but I think that's more of a personal preference than, it's more of a personal preference. But
I've found that video is useful for maintaining relationships. It's not useful for establishing relationships. So
I think I would push back on that. Only, is it useful? Yes. Is it ideal? No. And I think it's just, I don't know if we have other options, right? So what else can you do? At that meeting, interesting enough, and it really solved the problem, I thought, is that we had some folks who were on Zoom, and then we had, the rest of us. There was about 15 total participants, and there was probably 8 of us actually in this conference room, and the other 7 were calling in vis-a-vis Zoom. And they use this, it's a newer product. It's called The Owl, like the bird, The Owl. And what it was able to do is very nicely integrate the Zoom plus the video of and audio of the people in that physical room, and then it put it all together. Because I've been in meetings more recently where, they had Zoom, but they also had people at the meeting physically, and it was horrible. The sound was bad. People didn't know who was talking. They couldn't hear people. It was horrible. So I just thought that was a tremendous tool to kind of link those two things together and make it work. So I see much more of the digital stuff. I think it's here to stay. And the other thing too, at least for me, I can expand my reach, right? I mean, from a virtual perspective, I have a client out in the mecca of technology in Arkansas, but I mean that's not in the Philadelphia area, obviously, but I have another one down in Memphis, Tennessee, and we're seem to be doing fine, right? So it actually expands the reach of my services. Now, conversely, that also means competitors can come my way too. So it's a two-way street, but there's some advantages, and I'm trying to take advantage of them.
Yeah, I agree. It's probably a technology that's adaptation will continue at a use and adaptation will continue at a high rate. And a data point to support that is that I've read that airlines are not expecting business travel to come back to pre-pandemic levels for years.
Yeah. Great. I didn't have anything else. I mean, Raj, in closing, you want to provide any notes or suggestions?
No, don't have anything else. I think, Emily, if you can just go to the preceding slide. I think that's the last one. I can't remember, or maybe it's the next one. Yeah. So we talked about the next webinar. I don't have any other follow-ups. I'll invite any other questions. My information is on the slides. So Zoe or Mark, I'll send those to you, and you can distribute them to the group. People are welcome to reach out. I'm looking forward to being a Beacon member, and I just appreciate everybody's time this morning. And again, my goal was for everybody to have gotten at least one new idea for their own business or for their client's business out of it. So thank you so much.
Beacon is the premier executive networking organization serving the Mid-Atlantic region. To learn more, go to beaconforlife.org.